Good evening. The session recording has started. My name is Ria. I am a teacher and a research associate at Nerman. I will be moderating today's session. I am a teacher of English and a teacher of social studies at Nerman. So both these lecture series were very interesting and important for me because they advanced the dialogue of teaching pedagogies that I am very invested and thoroughly interested in. And I've seen that a lot of teachers from yesterday's talk also came in. We had a discussion about how pedagogies can be improved, about what is missing in the current system, and it is very nice to see your participation. And I truly enjoy all the conversations that happen through the question answer round at the end, and even after that with everyone who's known me, who has my email address. So please feel free to drop in your questions, drop in your thoughts, even after the session, and stay connected with us. So I'll just talk a little bit about Nerman lecture series first. We are trying to do a Nerman lecture series on a monthly basis. This is the third edition. It's called Teachers, Teaching and Training. So we're going to talk about the teaching of social studies and English primarily. But at the same time, the talk also focuses on how teachers can be trained, what is it that can be done to improve the teaching of these two particular disciplines. Uh, Today's session is the teaching of English. So when I started teaching English here, I've learned a lot on the job. I've learned a lot teaching and being in the classroom at Nerman, and I'm hoping that Nita ma'am, is going to share whatever with you helps you today learn similar things that I have done. Let me talk a little bit about the organization itself. Let me talk a little bit about Nirman. Nirman is a not-for-profit organization. It is based out of Banaras. We work in Varanasi. We also work in 12 adjoining villages in the district. It was started in 1919, so this is the 30th year of working. Nirman has worked in the fields of education, arts, research, and we have three main wings at Nerman, the organization. So first is our innovative school campuses. It's called Vidyashram, the South Point School. We have two campuses, one in the city and one in the Bay Tower village. It's an integrated school. It's an integrated, inclusive school where we have students from diverse backgrounds in the classroom. So students from the families of farmers, weavers, daily wage workers, entrepreneurs, researchers. They're all part of the school. They're all studying together. We also have international students who are part of our classrooms. We also run a research wing called the Center for Post-Colonial Education. This is where we invite study abroad students from universities. We invite collaboration from educators and artists in different fields. We also have an artist studio. We collaborate with artists from various backgrounds of music, theatre, martial arts. On most years, leaving aside this particular year, our school calendars are filled with like a lot of events. Every month there's something happening. There is a healthy food fair happening. There's an annual fair happening, and that is what keeps it very interesting. Such events also kind of add to the teaching of English, the experience of teaching English in Nirman. I would now like to introduce Nita ma'am, as she's known to all of us here, Professor Nita Kumar otherwise. She completed her Ph.D. from the University of Chicago. Her fields of research have been history of modern India, anthropology, and European and Russian history. She's taught at University of Chicago, Brown University, University of Michigan, amongst other places. And she's also the founder and director at Nirman. So for the past 30 years, she's taught, written curricula, trained teachers, and worked in education as a whole sector. She's written multiple books and research papers, presented her research at numerous places. She's also taken multiple university courses in South Asian history, gender, Bollywood. Over the years, she's also devoted her time to training teachers, and not just teachers at NIRMAN, but also teachers and prospective pre-service teachers from different BLED departments of other universities. And without spending more of your time at the introductions, I would now like to invite Nita ma'am to start today's lecture on the teaching of English. We will be having a question and answer round at the end of the talk. So please feel free to keep dropping your questions in the chat box as and when you can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ria. Listening to the introduction and the list of all the things that I've done, I feel like saying to at least everyone present here that the thing that I have done most, or at least worried about and tried to do the most, is actually how to make the teaching of English successful for a certain kind of children in India. You know, this is at the heart of both the problem and the kind of thing that we need to address very urgently if you want to get anywhere in our work in education. So a warm welcome to everyone who's here, especially if you've come back, and also to the new ones. Let me begin by saying that I understand, I'm imagining, so tell me if I'm wrong later, but I think that almost everyone present is an educator. And I think it would be fine for me to therefore also presume that the main question that everyone has on their minds is actually not about just teaching English in general or enumerating all the different ways to teach English, but actually how to do so, how to teach English to those children who are not from English-speaking families. That is, maybe first-generation learners, but even if they are from educated families, those families are not in the practice of using English at home. So the real problem is, if we might coin a term, the production of English, not the reproduction of English. The reproduction would mean when your family already knows English and you're just going to pass it on to another generation. And the production would mean when there is no background and so on to English in your family. In the place I'm located in, Banaras or UP, it's known euphemistically, I would say, as mahol nahi hai, vatavaran nahi hai, right? Or in English, iska koi background nahi hai. So that's the kind of problem I'd say I'm targeting today. And I think most of you might be actually most interested in that aspect. How can English be taught when, in fact, it's the school that's totally responsible for teaching it and not the family? Okay, so what I'll do, as is my usual practice, I'm going to look at different kinds of schools. I don't want to generalize across the board. I want to be very specific and tell you about exactly the kinds of schools which I am talking about. And in fact, I'll tell you about actual children. Their names, of course, have been changed in the interest of confidentiality, but they are very alive to me through my research. So let's begin at sort of the bottom rung of the ladder, which is our village schools, government schools in the village. Presently, I live in the village, and therefore I have a lot of time to observe the families and homes of children. But even before that, even before the lockdown of COVID-19, we do have a school in the village, as Ria mentioned, and I spent a lot of time observing, walking around, talking, and doing research in the village. Now, village schools do teach English, and I have attended the English classes apart from other classes. But if you think about, let me just take 3 or 4 villages as an example, the villages of Bachao, Betawar, Karsara, Chitoni. These are all villages just around our school from which the children that come to our school come. If you think that these villages have a few thousands of school-going children among them, and all of them are studying English in school, And you think, what should be one kind of evidence of that English teaching? And what you confront after you inquire like that is a kind of situation of booklessness, of nothingness, of no discourse about English at all. So partly, it's just a question of an institutional lack or absence. There is actually absolutely no system of having a library or a community center or any kind of a resource place where a child could possibly access a book in English to read for pleasure, a storybook, or something that is outside the course. And of course, children are intelligent little beings. They have a lot of energy and imagination. So you walk around and they are playing all the time, at any time of the day or night. I have yet to see a village child reading. And the one child who I did see, by the way, sitting on a cot and with a book open and his head buried in it, was reading a textbook, his own class book. And it was a very, very simple book, because that's how you do it in a village school. You start English a little bit later. And he was sitting there poring over BAT, bat, COT, cot, BED, bed, PIN, pin, and the small vowel sounds in English, which are the first rung of the ladder in learning English. And he was, of course, as bored as it's only possible for an intelligent person to be with such an exercise. So this situation of what I've called booklessness or nothingness, the total absence of any attention to narratives, to stories, to fiction, to storytelling, to the power of language, to the power of words, when trying to engage with the teaching of English. This complete blank that we have in our villages in India is a very strong indictment of our democracy. Because one thing you'll never find is a child from an upper class family or a rich family poring over a book at a certain age to study BAT, BAT, and COT, COT, or trying to even engage themselves in that. Now, I'm not claiming that all people who are wealthy or who are middle class, etc., love to read and their homes are full of books and they promote book reading and learning. That's not the argument. The point is that a child is precisely is undernourished precisely in these ways, when all we talk about is physical undernourishment, but he's also intellectually and imaginatively undernourished through the ways in which we proceed with our English teaching in municipal government schools, including the village schools that I've been observing. I'll come to some of the solutions later. There are things to talk about in solutions. Let me move on to the next rung of the ladder, which are small, private, so-called English medium schools. Almost everyone who sets up a private school makes it English medium and claims that that's what it is. And the one that I'm thinking of is called Brilliant. They have names like that, glorious and shining and wonderful and great. And this one's called Brilliant. And the child whom I visit from that school at home is called Anita, with a sister called Aparna, right? And they are happy as bees, buzzing around and jumping around, and very, very excited about their school learning, showing me all their books and copies and displaying what they have learned, what they've written, what they can read, etc. And they again have the same kind of textbook in which there are three-letter words spelled out. So you could have, say, P-E-N, and they're completely able to read that, so they can read the letters. And then Aparna makes an interesting comment. She says, "Don't ask me anymore. I'm not able to join the letters." And looking at her face, which is on the verge of bursting into tears, I refrain. I was about to actually hide the picture of pen and ask her to read it after she has spelled P-E-N. But I understand where exactly the failure lies. The failure lies in that she has not been taught it phonetically. She doesn't know how to make the sound of the words. So she cannot actually read pen because she doesn't know how to say pe, e, na. And instead, she knows just how to recognize the letters, which, given that there are 26 letters, right, in the English language, is not a stupendous feat. So she knows how to recognize them, but she doesn't know how to sound them out in order to make a meaningful word out of them. Now, looking at her and her sister and seeing this whole dilemma, which is part of the larger dilemma of the teaching of English in all these schools, which are so carefully selected by these loving, affectionate, ambitious parents who really, really want their children to have the best that they can afford, and scraping and saving from their earnings, they put their children in these private schools. And the school fails them by not having the technology, by which I mean by not knowing simply that all you have to do in order to build a bedrock of knowledge in English is to teach it phonetically, instead of which all they do is some kind of outdated, centuries old methodology, which I don't think anyone but our kinds of countries practices anymore. It's a very sad failure of our country and our educational system to not know about the foundations of teaching a language, to not worry about it, to not discuss it, debate it, and develop things further. And for all these schools to exist where no matter how well-meaning they may be, even how kind and friendly to children, they just don't have the technology, the actual way, the technique, and the pedagogical approach in order to lay the foundations for the child. Children of such schools will give you the impression that they are helpless, just like this one who was about to burst into tears, that they are dying to resolve a mystery, to solve the puzzle. They are at the gates of a great treasure house that could be open to them. And somehow adults are not able to take the next step. It's as if they were crying out and asking to adults, could you not please reveal this mystery to us? How do we do it? And adults are not being able to tell them, they're not being able to help them. It's rather inexcusable. And I think for many of us, this kind of experience might have been the trigger which set us off on the road to education. It was partly for me. When I said in the beginning that my main preoccupation had been about how to teach English, I meant precisely this. I was not interested in how people like me knew English. I'll come to that later. We'll reach that kind of school also. But rather in the technique, the technical part of that issue of why some children didn't. And after they spent, people like Anita and Aparna, after they spend 10, 12 years of schooling on this, they still will not be able to speak fluently and coherently. The next school, going up the ladder, is what I call the Indigenous School, which is usually a school run in the local language. So in our case, in UP, a Hindi or Urdu medium school. I'm going to look at a school called Durgacharan, one of the many, many old schools of Banaras, which I've studied extensively. And let me begin by saying that I mean no criticism. It's just being used as a type, in a typology. And Durgacharan is actually brilliant in the arts, and it has lovely, lovely graduates who can do all kinds of artistic things. Many of them have been our teachers, and I'll come to that in a second. But first, let me tell you what goes wrong, as a teacher tells me, as my observation in the classroom tells me. They use the translation method. They are completely unashamed about it, unapologetic, and that's what they call it. We use the translation method. Now, what does this mean? It means that every single thing that they read from their textbook is immediately translated into Hindi and then offered to the class. And when they teach grammar or they teach literary analysis, that means comprehension, or they do other kinds of exercises and questions and answers, every single word is translated into Hindi. What that means is that the child is offered a crutch which he or she learns to rely on so totally that the mind actually becomes closed to the possibility of trying to give due respect to the language by trying to understand it. You don't need to understand it. You don't even need to try, because you always will have this parallel meaning offered to you in Hindi. Before you even think about it, before you even try, as soon as you hear an English word, you grasp for its Hindi translation. You reach out for it. Now, while I'm critiquing this and I'm saying it's one of the biggest problems, mistakes, and faults of a huge, huge, huge number of schools in our country, I do want to say, and I'm especially going to mention Ria, who introduced me today. I do want to say that there are nuances possible and there are ways of utilizing translation very strategically when teaching any subject in English or teaching English itself. And I'm open to considering all that and to learning more and thinking about it. And I certainly don't have a closed mind. But my own research on the subject has shown me that the problem with so many people that I have met who have studied in these schools in being able to actually use English. They have a very wonderful passive knowledge of English. They can understand it partly, they can express themselves in writing, they just cannot speak it. And therefore, when they don't speak it, they can't engage in a conversation and they tune off very quickly. So we have had numerous candidates appearing for the post of an English teacher who cannot keep on at any level a dialogue in English. And when I keep saying, how will you teach here? It's an English medium school. You need to speak in English. हाँ मैम हम कर लेंगे, हमको एक मौका तो दीजिए, हम करके दिखाएंगे, हम सीख लेंगे, हमने अभी तक कोशिश नहीं की, अब हम करके दिखाएंगे. And because of course anyone can do anything they wish to if they really try, we keep giving such candidates, if they are good in other respects, that opportunity. But, with one or two exceptions, I still have to find any of the scores of them, close to 100 candidates that we might have tried, who are actually able to move from that point of a fear of speaking in English to an actual fluency in it. And partly it's just because of the age. It's because of the age. You could have done it in school as a child, and it's too hard a battle for most of us as adults. But adults keep trying, as you know. The next kind of school is what I call the quote-unquote imitation public or missionary school, by which I simply mean that they have a name which savors of convent. They use the word convent, they use the word saint, they use the word public, and that's fine. They're working on a model, and it's a completely legitimate kind of school. It just should not be confused with the quote-unquote real missionary school as run by priests and nuns, and public school, which belongs to a body called Public School Association. So in these schools, the problem lies in certain bogies, as I call them, the bogie of question and answer, the bogie of classwork, the bogie of homework, the bogie of exams, tests and exams. Now, my example in this case would be from a very interesting school called Umahutullah Gulzar-e-Talim. And it is actually, it might sound like a madrasa, it's not at all a madrasa, it's a public school according to its own nomenclature. It is also a very interesting and something to admire, because it is the institution run by, produced by, and located in the locality of weavers who are almost totally Muslims in the city of Banaras. So it is a weavers community school in which they are trying to make it like a public school. It's English medium. It teaches English from pre-nursery, nursery, kindergarten onwards. It's got a wonderful modern building, nice, airy, spacious classrooms, excellent furniture, trained teachers, everything that fairly upper middle class private English medium school would have. If I observe, as I did in the English class of class one, the teacher is introducing verbs, and she's using, as many classes do, the verb to read, because to read has become nuanced in many ways. It's very interesting to children because it means to read books, etc., which they do all the time in school. Uh, but also it has a colonial meaning, which is to study. So old fashioned people used to ask, where do you read? Meaning, where do you study? Right? And of course, in its translations, padhana, it means to recite, like Quran padhana, right? Etc. Now, she uses this verb in a question answer format. She's put three questions on the board and she wants the children to answer them. And the questions are like, do you read? Does she read? Etc. And yeah, and can you read? Do you read the Quran? So the school has this policy of making its textbooks very close to the culture of the community they cater to, which is a great aim. It's something that we all try for. We want to get close to the home culture and the community culture of our students. We want to devise curricula and, if possible, textbooks, which are going to be meaningful in the vocabulary they use, in the kinds of images they have for children, vis-a-vis their own personal lives. So this is a great step forward in their teaching of English. The answer to the three questions would be, yes, I read. Yes, she reads. Yes, I read the Quran regularly. But guess what? In her class of whatever number, 30 maybe, only one student gets it right, only one. All the rest fail to understand what is in this adult mind with regard to a question which says, do you read? Right? Or does she read? Most of the children know how to copy words. They understand the letters. They know what is a blackboard, what is their copy and pencil. And what they do is they write as the answer to question one, question two, right? They see two sentences following each other, and the second one must be after the answer of the first one. They don't know what is a question, and they don't know what is an answer, and they don't know what is a verb, and what is the teacher getting at, and what is all this about. And may I add, which is very important, that the one girl who does get it, Sabina, I went and talked to her extensively. I followed her home and I understood a lot about her. So I'll tell you in a nutshell. The reason why she's so good and she's able to get it is because the teacher had already given this, had done this as classwork a previous day, had given it as homework, and now this was preparation for a test. And little Sabina has a tutor at home who goes over everything and makes sure that it's dinned into her head and she has the exact answer to every single question. So it's a richer weaver's family than most, and at least it's a very self-conscious family who understand the importance of learning. And so they have this tutor. Well, a lot of children have tutors, but mostly at this rung of the ladder, not the village children, not necessarily the poor students who go to the small local so-called English medium schools, and not the ones who go to the indigenous schools of Hindi and Urdu medium. But after that, as long as it's an English medium school of whatever size, called brilliant, glorious, sunshine, moonshine, whatever, they are going to rely, if the parents are not very educated, on a tutor. And they're going to start at the age of 4 or 5 because of, again, a technological flaw in the teaching of the school. The teacher, in this case, does not understand how a child's mind might work. She is going by her adult presuppositions of, here's a question, here's an answer. And if you ask something as a question, then of course you have to give something as an answer. But this whole format has to be explained to children in various ways, direct and indirect, through various games and exercises, by making them play around, by making them act out things, by showing them various artifacts and pictures and images and, performative things. And of course, using a lot of rhymes of creatures sitting down, lying down, running around, jumping, doing a lot of storytelling where all kinds of verbs are being used so that they have an idea that what they are being asked about or told about has to do with their actual everyday worlds in which they live. A weaver's child is not going to encounter reading at home. It is not one of the verbs that she has experienced as an action. So, the fault, if I may use that term, in this case, even as I praised the school and its curriculum development for getting close to the community, the problem lies in that they interpret the community simply on its religious lines, and therefore, one of the questions is, do you read the Quran? A good question, but it's also a working class community, it's an artisan community. And that should be reflected also in the questions and answers that are meant for the smaller children. And there are many ways to do this, and all of us know of some, and I can touch on a few others, time permitting. Finally, we come to the topmost rung, which is the missionary or public school, the model school, which is the way that if we ever want to claim that Indian education is good or great or has any saving grace, it's because of such schools. They have provided in the past, the leaders of the country, and etc., etc., etc. Okay, in our context, what matters is the following. If you go to observe in a regular school, such as taking Lucknow in UP or Calcutta, such as Loreto or La Martiniere, or in Delhi, modern school in the past, Vasant Valley, or something in the present. Schools like that, if you go to even outside the mainstream, Krishnamurti school, these are schools, if you go to observe, your heart is at rest, you feel happy, you feel as if you have been emancipated from all the problems that you were carrying on your shoulder as a burden. No child is being scolded and, of course, not abused verbally or through a threat of physical abuse. They are not writing things mechanically from the blackboard, especially at the ages of 4 or 5. They are allowed to play and experiment and interact. They do a lot of music and dance and everything I was talking about. When the time is right, they learn how to read and write English. They read it phonetically, as I suggested they do. It's very carefully calibrated. They learn to write in exactly the right hand, where to begin, where to end, where to put a little tick. They are made masters of the language through very well developed and then adapted technologies of people like Froebel and Montessori and Dewey. So there is a lot to be learned from such schools, because you could ask the simple question, if certain schools in our country can do it, why could not all schools do it? I mean, we know the answers, we know the solutions, we know the techniques, we know the technology. We don't have to go outside our country, we don't have to worry about abstract things, it's right there. How can some people know how to teach English and others fail dismally at the very same enterprise? And there's more than one answer, but the main answer is that actually these schools also do not so much know how to do it as they know how to rely on the family for succeeding in their enterprise. In all these schools, true, the atmosphere of the school, the running of the classroom, and the campus, etc., are very, very imaginatively laid out, very beautiful, and to be appreciated. And close to my heart, they all have libraries that are wonderful. They all have libraries with actual books in lovely shelves and cupboards. And children can actually access it. It's not just a falsification as in all the other schools, that here's our library, but there's nothing for children to actually use. So they have wonderful libraries. And yet, what the schools do when they go through their admissions procedure is to actually interview the families. And God forbid, if a family was to try to have their child admitted when they themselves could not speak English. They would be willing to pay the fees because actually they can. Many people can pay the fees of all these schools. But they can't pass the test of a simple direct question. It's put so directly, it's really truly disturbing. Would you be able to help with the homework? And they should not say, no, we can't. We would have to get a tutor. That's what some of them do anyway. But they can't say that. They have to be able to pass that interview phase through some kind of a depiction of themselves as being the right kind of parents for such schools. It's a very tough game, and for the most part, it's played by certain kinds of parents never even entering the school gates. They would not even dream of trying to get admission to the school. And what the school does, of course, is run a parallel school. So none of the schools of this category, literally without an exception, has ever worked on the problem of how to teach English or any of their subjects to children who did not already have supportive families, educated families. That's the crux of with so much vehemence that the school is doing its job by relying on the family. Because if the school was doing it itself, then it could have children within its student body who did not have those kinds of families. So they run a parallel school because such is the mandate of the government, in which they have all the children who are from uneducated families or lower class families. And this parallel school might be in a different building or in the same building at different times or somehow separated, so that you could really get fooled. You'd hear a cook's child or a rickshawala's child as going to DPS, and you think, wow, DPS. What he's really going to is the parallel school run by DPS, or in some other case, the school run at a different time in the same premises, maybe with the same teachers, maybe with other teachers. This is the solution of all these schools. They never got interested in trying to actually develop English teaching for non-English speaking students. So I want to speak now, just for a few minutes, about possible strategies and solutions. I've touched on some of them. I've said something about the fallacy of the translation method and the bogey of questions and answers, and the horrible dilemma of relying on the family. So these are specific problems that already savor of solutions. But I'm going to talk very directly about some of the solutions which we use in our own school. Since we have this school, Vidyashram, the South Point, set up, as Priya said, in 1990, Riya said. So we have a lot of experience under our belt, and everything that I say is spoken from not the vantage point of some kind of dream or vision or, abstract philosophy. It's from the sweat and toil and labor of year after year, semester after semester, trying to make a particular vision work. So how do we teach English in our school? There are 3 or 4 things that I can run through very quickly. The first is to make your classroom into an alternative world. The world out there is hierarchical. It does have differences. And one of the ways of measuring and seeing the difference is through the knowledge of English. So there is no question but that English is social capital, and those who have it are supposed to be somehow higher up or more privileged. But in your classroom, you could create a situation where there are different kinds of differences. You should emphasize diversity and difference, but have so many layers of them, so that children could be, short or tall, bicycle riders or not, good in football or not, able to draw or not so interested, and so on and so forth. I'm not able to immediately come up with lots of differences, but you can extend it, the list, as far as you like. And everything will be only fun, interesting, and educational for children. So once there are many lines of difference, then the one line, whether English is spoken at home or not, does not matter so much. Why is this important? It's important because one of the main reasons why English is difficult for poor children to learn, if they don't have English at home, is because of the psychological persuasion that has somehow gotten communicated to them already, even though they are small, that they are not going to be able to do it. Even their parents say it all the time. Their parents are among the first to criticize the child for being badmash, harami, shaitan, etc., because he's not going to sit down whenever called to that same boring old book and copy. And so the child is stigmatized and the child is made to feel there's direct comparison, explicit comparison, and showing him down. And there is an overall discourse in a place like a village that there is a backwardness to the place compared to the city. And that backwardness is somehow intangible, but English is certainly a component of it. I mean, I have some very, what should I call them, not friends in the village. So I don't like the word enemies, but they're certainly not compatible people as far as I see. And they're usually abusive. That means they are not polite. They are rude and they say nasty things to me. But the one time they came close to paying a compliment was when they used some weird Hindi word, and I pride myself on my Hindi, and I said, "What is that?" And they said, "Well, you who are a great English speaker, blah, blah, blah." And I thought, my goodness, this was at the back of their mind all this time, that they don't speak English, but I do. So it just goes to show that even the smartest people in a village are not free of this bad self-consciousness that somehow English is a social capital or an item of power, and they are disadvantaged compared to that. So it's very important to create a classroom in which children can be, we can reinforce the idea that yes, you are different, but every child is so different to every other child in so many ways. If we can only free them from this burden of backwardness which village children carry. So that's one solution. The other is to, in general, make the spaces very, very friendly in a school, as child-centered, as, let me even say, feminine as we can. They should be soft, not hard, more resembling the family than the workplace, adult workplace. And I know that the whole tendency of schooling, especially in a country like India, is in the opposite direction. Everyone admires little rectangular blocks of buildings and straight linear lines. You know, if you make curves, if you make ins and outs, if you make small corners and niches, you're going to be criticized at some point. And even our best supporters, I have noticed, have said with a little hint of apology, like this is a different kind of school to our school because it has child-centered architecture and spaces. But that is the way to make a child feel really comfortable, just like a child does at home, where things are very intimate and supportive. And that opens the gates to learning, as I argue. That makes the learning, especially of a foreign language or foreign sounds and foreign constructions, easier to get across, because the child is also not battling hard surfaces, harsh timings, all kinds of rules and mechanisms to repress herself. The more concrete ideas that we use are to rely on a lot of storytelling and narratives, to use a lot of books, both for reading and also to write books and stories, and to use the body a lot. And I'm just going to rush through all of them. I'm going to say that it's true that not all schools have libraries, especially if you are just an alternative school, a small school trying to do right things. But how would you have a grand library or one of those things? It needs money, doesn't it? But there are ways around that. Instead of spending money on textbooks, even for the government, instead of buying one textbook per child, buy one storybook per child. You would have 30. You would have a library of 30 storybooks in a classroom. Textbooks can be inside the teacher's head. A teacher can be the textbook. It's very easy in the primary sections. And the lower down you go, the easier it is. But you can't really replace fiction and the pleasure of reading books. So if you can create that by any means, it's very desirable to do that. Now we have a huge library, but what we also have in common with other people is that we don't necessarily have ever found a good trained librarian, and we certainly don't even have teachers who are able to comfortably use books in the classroom. Just now, after the lockdown, I went around and retrieved all the books that had been issued from the library for use in the classrooms. There were about 10 to 20 in each room, books of fiction, and they were all a mess. They were completely destroyed, some of them beyond retrieval, some of them on the verge of it. I felt very sorry because the only way that could happen, or almost the only way, there could be other ways of destroying a book, is through very rough wear and tear, through not having taught children how to use it, how to open it, how to value it, how to keep it, etc. So the problem of not reading fiction and not using lots of different kinds of books is not exclusive to a certain kind of school. It's a very general overall problem in India. But if we want the spoils of democracy to be shared by all, so we don't want to have a privileged class who knows all the best literature and culture of civilization in the world, right? What a classical curriculum is supposed to teach, the core knowledge. And we don't want to go to the other extreme of, say, extremists, political extremists, who now say only our country is great, you don't need anything from anywhere else in the world, and everything is there already in our country, your own language will reveal all the truths to you, etc., etc. We are not getting into that. But if you want to make all the citizens of India at least minimally acquainted with all the wonderful things that there are in the world in terms of literary and cultural achievement, they have to learn to read, they have to learn to enjoy reading, they have to learn to enjoy narratives, stories, how to put A, B, C together in a linear fashion, and then what happens and what turns life can take. They have to be able to empathize with characters. These are all the marks for success even in careers. But it's certainly something that is needed for a democracy where all the topmost people have exclusive mastery over the spoils, as I call it, of civilization. So one of our solutions is also to use the body, which is an interesting way of which we have developed. So in the Western countries, in most developed countries, East and West, there is a lot of reliance on images and technology, and you need money for that. You need to buy all the paper and the computers or laptops and all the stuff that will allow you to use that kind of body of resources, images and so on. But if you use your body, if you use your voice and your face and your physical body, you could do a lot of music and dance and theater and achieve the same ends. So we sort of replace in our school, in the realm of the arts, the fine arts and technology to some extent with music, dance and theater, because that, I mean, it's not that it's free, I said it's cheap, but it's not completely free because you need to train teachers in order to get them to do that, and their time is precious. You need to have the trainers to teach them, and you have to get them to come and pay them for it. But that aside, once you do that, then you have a wonderful corpus of activities which you can use for children to learn anything you want: nouns, verbs, adjectives, sentences, whole stories, right? I mean, we do it in very well planned ways. I'm not getting into that. So you can start with nursery rhymes and get on to more sophisticated songs, and you can start with simple play acting, get on to more complicated skits and plays, and so on. But you can see the potential for teaching it. Remember, this is a very interesting point, that ours is famous as an oral culture. India, even though we have all these texts and all these texts were oral texts to begin with. They were written down much later. Our strength lies in orality, but we are losing it if we have not already lost it. Why don't we learn English orally more than relying so much on reading and writing from the very beginning? If we could only present every single story also orally, and have children write, of course, but then present it orally, and have them act it out and enact it orally, there would be no fear and no shortcoming in their knowledge of English. That's where and there's been criticism of this for at least 100 and 150 years. In my research, I have found all these English inspectors going out to inspect all the schools, and what they find is that children can rattle off things which they read or which they have learnt by heart. But as soon as you ask them a question, they're frozen. They don't know how to speak spontaneously in English. So I'm going to end by saying that the last final word should be with creative writing. Writing is, again, more important than reading, in that if you can begin children off by having them express themselves in that symbol system, which is called the alphabets. And in the beginning, it'll be just like drawing for them, but that's fine. The symbol system is akin to drawing. And then as they proceed year after year, they're going to feel so good about writing. They will never be afraid of it. They'll never worry about it. And creative writing has a huge potential in any way that you like. So these are some of the strategies which we use. I hope that, I didn't make them too unsystematic, but let's have some questions from you all and further discussion then. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nita ma'am. Actually, the first question that I was going to pose is something that you already covered, was about the tools and techniques that can be used in an English classroom. But I think you've spoken about that in detail in the last part of your talk. So I would like to start with a comment by Kesang. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that name wrong. They say that I do agree completely that the first step to learn or teach English is through teaching sound or phonetics, as the sound is the first step to learn any language. So this is a comment by them. And then there's a question by Ruhi on phonetics, that the transition from reading phonetically to being able to read fluently and comprehend it is sometimes difficult for children. What are some ways that teachers can use to make this smooth? This is the first question. And the second part of the question is something that we get a lot, is about using English in a multilingual or a bilingual classroom. So if you can talk about the approach in the school. I just wanted to add quickly over here that we also had a few questions about how the new education policy 2020 is talking about multilingualism, and we have done a talk last month related to this. So I will be sharing the link in the chat box. So please feel free to look at that recording.
Okay, should I take those two questions?
Yes.
So the first one was about transition from phonetics to comprehension of what is being read, right? Because it's completely true that you could
and even
sound out and read something. You could even read a long word, or you could read a sentence, but that doesn't mean that you understand it, right? That's the question, if I get it right. So in this case, the phonetics is one part of the technique, but really the second one has to be a lot of oral work in which you are supplementing the word which is being sounded out, or the phrase or the sentence, with the action for it, right? And a display of it. And the display should not always be just pointing out like, here's a book, and here's a face, or something like that, that's little uninspiring for students. Remember that children are extremely imaginative and their heads are bubbling with energy and ideas. So try to make it a little more complex and therefore challenging and fascinating by saying, playing a game, I see something, right? And everyone has to say what they see, and everyone has to guess what they see. And before you know it, they're so captivated by the activity that they are all increasing their vocabulary, but also the formation of I see. And after that, you can do things like what can you do? And they do different things, or whatever word you want to teach. So, this is a very simple example, but you can think about performance as the key element, which is what I'm talking about: activity, bodily activity, and performance. Again, the question might be that in a classroom of a certain size, which is a room maybe very crowded and desks are just next to each other, there's no place for movement. How would you do it? You'd have to change the space. You'd have to take them outside to the veranda, to the playground, wherever you like, make them sit in a circle, make them form groups, and then do it. You're going to have to do that. There's no way out and there is no shortcut. You can't sit in rows of desks which are completely jam-packed, facing the teacher, all heads towards her. You can't sit like that and do any of these activities that we're talking about. So you could, even in teaching of phonetics, you could probably have trouble. You need to bring them close to you, sit on the ground preferably, or in some kind of a different formation, and then point out how letters are sounded. As long as they are still in their rows, there is an obstacle to learning. So, in answer to your question, to go back to your exact question, I would say performance is the way out, using the body. You can use it very subtly and in small measure, or you can do it in a big way. But you have to figure out how to demonstrate what it is that you're teaching. Just not keep on repeating the word. Because if you keep repeating the word, unless you use translation, there is no reason, there's no way that a child could understand the meaning. It's just a bunch of sounds. And they may make the sound correctly, as you're saying, but how do they know the meaning? You'll have to perform it. You could ask, you could use peer learning, you could ask if anyone else in the class can perform it. And usually, this is the rule, believe me, from my years, decades of work, usually there's one child who knows the answer to every single question of the teacher. And the second question was about if it's a multilingual classroom, right? How do you teach English? Well, actually, that makes it easier if it's a multilingual classroom, because the teacher is not going to know all the languages of all the children. If it's a single language classroom, they're all Hindi speakers for the most part, then the temptation is really great for the teacher, who's also a Hindi speaker, to lapse into Hindi to explain something. Sooner or later, they just get exhausted and the teacher says, "Acha, iska matlab to ye hota hai." You know, just gives up and feeds them the answer. But if you think, I don't know their languages, and the only common language now is going to have to be English, English and my body. Okay, remember that. Use both. The body can be read by children and all its movements, and your English will then be understood by children progressively, by leaps and bounds. The progress is very fast, and it's not arithmetic, but it's not. What do I want to say? It's multiplied, right? It's not added. The progress is like that.
All right, thank you. Last question, which is again multilingual. It's related to multilingual education. Again, something that is asked a lot. It's about few teachers also prefer, they're comfortable with using a multilingual approach in their classrooms. Sometimes the reasons can be that they themselves are more comfortable in the local language, but in a lot of cases there is a very strong theoretical understanding that teachers have about using multilingual approach, that why should one use multilinguality in a classroom as a teacher, as an approach. So your comments on that.
Do you have another question at all, Ree?
No, this. Oh yes, I'm so sorry. There is one question by Arunita that she talks about how she's put in a comment first that she thinks that students need to think in English in order to develop a very good fluency in order to be able to express themselves, and she would like to know your suggestions about how to facilitate something like this, where you are encouraging them to think directly in English.
Let me answer that one first, right? Um, so that's an interesting way of putting it, to have students think in English. I mean, that's a faraway goal, and so let me come to that. But at least it's very important for the students to enjoy English, to not resist it, to not feel that it's a burden, and they every time they need to escape from it, take a deep breath, and now enjoy talking in their own language, because it was such a bore and so difficult to keep talking in English. We don't want that. We want them to enjoy it. And I think that the approach that I uh, propose and I like is when you think maybe my students will grow up to never need English for work. Maybe their work will be conducted in other languages. So we are not using it instrumentally or purposefully. All I want to do is to make them enjoy it, so they have another source of great pleasure in their lives. They are able to actually read stuff which is not all translated, and enjoy the beauties of another language, the way that other things are articulated in other ways. And so, even when their work is in their own language, they have no problem about that. They will have this great source of, if you like, leisure and pleasure and recreation and enjoyment. That should be the goal. Once you can make them enjoy it, whether through reading fiction or doing plays or singing songs or playing games, all these narrative and artistic ways, then maybe you are coming close to their thinking in English, because then they are in territories which they have encountered only in English. They haven't come through their mother tongues to that territory. It's something maybe like a game, like musical chairs. We have our children play musical chairs in preschool and class one and so on. And every little part of it is mostly explained in English because it's an English game with English set of rules and so on. It's just easier to speak it in English and play act it and then play the game in English, right? You don't say kursiyan and things like that, and so on. So there are many things like that which you approach only firstly and throughout in English. And because they are such fun, they are never resisted. They are learnt up very nicely. And once that happens and the extent of that increases, then you can say we are getting close to what you are suggesting, that the child is able to think in English. I don't think it happens for every single thought. That is also not desirable, because what about then all the virtues and richness and pleasure of other languages, which you should also know and enjoy? You can't always be thinking only in one language at the expense of others. What about, the pleasures of Hindi and Urdu, etc.? So the other question about a multilingual approach, I'm all for it. You see, it's very tricky. And I'm not even sure, I'll not be sure to the end of my days, whether it's possible to resist this seesaw effect, if you like, which is as soon as you give weight to one thing, the other becomes light. And it's very difficult to have two things which are equally weighty, right? As soon as you give importance to one language and you promote the pleasure and the enjoyment from that, as happens, say, in missionary schools, English missionary schools, then you make a sacrifice of your own Indian languages and they go out the back door because you're putting all your weight on English. So all your best plays are the ones performed in English, and your best songs are in English, and everything fun is in English. And then some things are left over and are given this token importance by being done in Hindi or your other languages. So it's very challenging. And I'm sorry, I don't really know all the answer to your question. I don't really have very strong thoughts on the subject because I haven't worked on it enough. I don't know that much about all the possibilities of a multilingual approach. I just know that there are these dangers to be avoided, there are these resources that it offers, and there are these possibilities.
All right, thank you so much. We will be closing the session because we have exceeded the time. There were a few other questions, but we will be covering them via email. We'll be sharing the lecture recording for both the talks, the one that happened yesterday and today, and lecture notes. So in those notes, there will be the answers to the missed questions as well. Thank you so
Sure.
much for coming today, and keep a lookout for our next edition.
Thank you. Bye bye.